This is the Coming Home Podcast with John Allen. 3, 2, 1, and welcome everybody to this episode of the Coming Home Podcast with John Allen. I am your humble host, the lost American in Norway, John Allen. For those of you who are watching or listening, please look in the episode description, and there you will see a couple of links where you can click in if you'd like to support the work that I do on the Coming Home Podcast with John Allen. Just check in the episode description, and there it is. And here is Bob Clendenin. Hi, Bob.
John, nice to meet you. How are you?
You know, as I told you before we went live on the mic, it's been a little hectic. I had to order that corona test for myself and our son. Our daughter has the coronavirus, but I don't know, I think she gets it from her mother. Her mother is a tough person of the Sami people, the Laplanders of Norway. She's tough. She's a little badass, and I think our daughter got most of her genes. So she's pretty much symptom-free, and she's been doing just fine.
She should skate through it, but my thoughts are with you.
Thank you, Bob. Thank you. We're trying to do the right thing here and notify all of our close contacts and everything and make sure they get checked out. And for those who are listening, that is the right thing to do. Do not take corona as a joke. I've been blessed so far. Our daughter is blessed. Like I said, she's pretty much symptom-free, but please don't take it lightly. You got to do the right thing, people.
Not to be trifled with.
So that's our health message for the day.
Well, it's fantastic to meet you, even under these circumstances.
Yes, thank you, Bob. Thanks for doing this. You know, this is somewhat of a surrealistic experience for me. You know, I've got a good amount of listeners and a good amount of viewers, and I've had some important people. I've had some famous people. I've had the average Joe on the street on my podcast. But I'm going to put you up there with that celebrity, that surprisingly reachable elite person.
I don't think I belong in that group, but I'm really flattered.
Dip your toes in that. Dip your toes in that world.
I'm celebrity adjacent. I think that's the best way to describe it.
I have to say, Bob, you are, well, you know, going back to Scrubs, we're not going to talk too much about Scrubs. We're going to talk about what you're doing with Vice Force Action Squad, or what you have done with Vice Force Action Squad. But the work that you did on Scrubs is one of my all-time favorite series. Now, my daughter was born, and then it was maybe a month after she was born that I discovered Scrubs. So this was a couple of years after Scrubs had already gotten started. And whenever I think of those first years of my daughter's life, I think of Scrubs. Sitting there watching that show, trying not to laugh because my daughter, pretty much newborn, is on my shoulder sleeping. And if I were to laugh, it would wake her up.
You know what's interesting is that, and you said your wife is in the health field.
Yes.
What routinely is said about Scrubs is that it's the most realistic show to medical professionals. That I'm sorry, my dog just opened the door. That, you know, is not. People who are really in the field say, well, ER is not representative. You know, Grey's Anatomy is not representative. It was really, if you're really in that field, Scrubs is the closest you're going to get to really being on point for what those guys go through, which is very, very flattering.
I believe that. The type of humor that they put out there in order to heal themselves from traumatic experiences, you know, the doctors and nurses there. I got to see that firsthand. I'm a former police officer, and I was also trained as a paramedic. So when I did my clinical time, I did it in an ER, and I saw how it doesn't matter how stressed out the doctors and nurses were. It doesn't matter what was going on. They always had their humor in place. There was a lot of laughter, a lot of positive emotion there, and I think it was medicine to combat the trauma that they were experiencing. Literally hands-on traumatic experiences.
I think you're right on.
Yeah.
And as an actor, it's one of my favorite experiences because it was such an absolutely free form experience. I adore Bill Lawrence, who is the creator and showrunner. And I ended up working subsequently with him on Cougar Town and some other shows and stuff. And his sets are just always an absolute actor's dream because they're so free and and positive, and people are there to have a good time, but be professional. It's just really a great experience. And the writing's always so brilliant that you're trying to be as good as the lines, which is often not the case, when you're needing to improve a bad script. And that's never the case with Bill's shows. You're desperately hoping that you match his writing.
From what I hear, from what I understand, he has, or his projects have a reputation of being a family-like atmosphere for the actors. I mean, you guys do what you do in front of the camera, but you guys also get to know each other, and a certain friendship, a certain family relationship is built. Is that true?
100%. And not only that, but you'll see if the people who are fans of all of his shows see the same people over and over again.
I've noticed.
He really loves, because he loves to use people who he genuinely enjoys working with. And I was lucky the Scrubs was the first thing I did with him. And we kind of hit it off, and I think he liked me, and I certainly liked him. And so he finds places for you in subsequent shows. And Zach Braff comes on Cougar Town, and I do, it's like everybody is very in the same crew, a lot of the same camera department, sound department, set dressers and stuff. So it's really exactly like that. It's a family that, I think Christopher Guest, who I've not worked with, is very similar. He has people that he genuinely enjoys going to work with. And so why not use those?
If it ain't broke, it don't need no fixing. Just keep on going, right?
It's true. And what's funny is when I look back at when I was first starting out in Los Angeles, and I'd get irritated at people who worked, I'd say the same people in somebody's shows, or the casting director would be using the same. I get so irritated because I wasn't in the circle. And then you realize, well, there is something to be said for using people who you have a confidence in their professionalism, their attitude on set. They're not going to be a headache. And if that's proven from your past experience, then of course you're going to use them. And it's a very natural human instinct. It's just frustrating for the people who are outside the circle to say, well, how do I get in then?
I guess I never thought of it from that angle. I would always, my inclination is to think that the creator of the show, or the director, producer, the people that are making it happen, are going to stick with what they know best, because, they have their living to make. They have their goals and their level of success that they would either like to attain or uphold. But there's another side of it, the newer actors who are trying to get into that circle. I guess selfish me, I never thought of that.
Right, exactly. Yeah, until you're in their shoes, right?
Well, you know what? I tried. I quite recently tried to get into to their shoes. It's kind of funny. And she's coming on. She's coming on as a guest here in a couple of weeks. She is a casting agent here in Norway, and she put out a call for actors to play the role of a villain, right? Mm-hmm. Yeah. And she said, just submit a couple paragraphs about who you are and a photo. So I did the paragraphs about who I am, but I was really not thinking about the photo. The photo of me is of me. It's like a quarter turn shot, and I'm smiling as wide as I can. Right. And again, the part was for a villain.
Not so villain-like.
Well, so she sent me a message back. She said, John, great smile, but you don't look like a villain. Sorry, I don't think you're going to get the part. And I had to laugh at myself, like, what an idiot. Why would you send that picture? Right. Of all the pictures I could have, I'm a big, solid power lifter. I could have sent myself in a tank top or something, flexing or something like that. And I send this picture of me smiling. So
one lesson, but you won't make that mistake again. I will
not make that mistake again. And maybe I'll get some tips from you about how to get into that world. But let me ask you, Bob. Okay, everybody knows your resume, but not everybody. I know your resume, but I don't know you, Bob, the person. Mm-hmm. Let me start with, prior to you getting into Hollywood, where are you born and raised, and when did you first get this idea, this desire to get into that world and become an actor?
I'm a very, very late join to the career. I was born in Ohio. My father was working after undergrad there. Quickly moved to the Bay Area.
Did you say Ohio?
Yeah, Newark, Ohio.
Okay, I'm from Ohio. I'm from Norton, Ohio. Yeah.
We were only there for a year and a half while he was with an aluminum company there, and then he went to business school and subsequently the Bay Area. But my real upbringing was in Australia. He was with a big consulting company, and they opened some offices in Melbourne and Sydney, and he was asked to go and oversee their opening until they could, get an Australian to run them. And it was supposed to be a 3-year thing. They fell in love with the country. And so I stayed there from about 8 to 18. I was there for about 10 years. All my high school and junior high were in Melbourne. And I came back to the United States to go to college. I was an engineer in college. I was a very heavy math and science nerd, and I thought that would be the profession for me. And I did not love it, and it was with a lot of really hardcore engineering types who really were into it, and my heart wasn't in it.
What was missing? What was missing in that career that you?
I'm not, I don't know whether it was just, I still love math and I still love analytical thought, but I wasn't driven by the material. And I said, well, I'll try doing a play just because I wanted a little bit of a pastime to offset the engineering. And I fell in love with just doing it. The people were so different than engineers, so open, and I really, really enjoyed it. I said, well, I want to do more of this. So I started doing more things with the theater department. I tried to do a couple classes there. If they were allowed, I was still technically an engineer, and I graduated as one, not well, but finally did get my diploma. But I thought, well, I would really like to pursue this. So I went to graduate school for acting immediately after that. And that was a 3-year master's program. I didn't know at the time it was sort of a training for the stage. And I got some advice from there that because I have a very distinct look, appearance, that maybe film and TV would be a good option for me. So I came out to Los Angeles in the early 90s, and then took about 2 or 3 years of kind of struggling and sending in headshots and getting rejected and not getting an agent and all that business, until I finally started to get a couple jobs, and those led to more. And
but in the meantime, before you got those first gigs, what were you doing for an income?
I had 2 main survival jobs. I worked there's an SAT review preparation company called Princeton Review, and I worked for them as a tutor. And then I also worked in a muffin factory. That's
a heck of a leap.
a company that did gift baskets, muffins, and cakes and things like that. And I worked in their phone center and ended up kind of sort of running their shipping department. And they were very understanding. All these places, both places were really good. There's so many jobs in Los Angeles that have to be cognizant of their employees having other aspirations.
I see.
And it sort of goes with the territory and people. And so if you can find a good one, they will be very understanding of you having to leave at 3 because you have an audition or whatever. So
it's not a cliche then that there are a lot of people in Los Angeles looking to get their feet wet in Hollywood. It's the truth.
Every waiter is a musician, a writer, or an actor. I mean, that's why would you live in a city this expensive and this enormous if that wasn't your, so it's true. And I think most people really are very respectful of it and know that everybody's got to start there, or most people have to start there and kind of work their way up until they get those breaks that they need.
Now, you talked about how it was, it's not like you find fame and fortune at once. You have to work for it. You've got to network. You've got to audition. Mm-hmm. Was there ever any point in your first years in Los Angeles where you felt like you might have to find something else to do? You might have to give up on that dream or that desire of being an actor.
It's really it can be really discouraging. I mean, the numbers that are working against you are really formidable. And I came here, I felt like I was a hotshot in graduate school. You're in a very small pool of actors. There were 4 in my class. There were 6 in the class behind. I mean, so every play that they do, you're going to be cast, and I was lucky to be cast very well. And so I came out here thinking I was a real hotshot, and I thought everybody's going to be clamoring to have more of me.
Yeah.
And they're all going to be fighting over who gets to represent me, and I'll have to pick and choose which movies I want, and you get knocked in the face pretty quickly with the reality that that's not the way it's going to be. And so it was very discouraging. I would do a play here and try to get casting directors or agents to come and see it, and no, they don't want to waste an evening on somebody they've never met. I mean, honestly, and I don't blame them in retrospect, but it's so hard and frustrating for you because you're like, well, I'm doing everything right, and I still can't get any kind of break. And it's just a matter, I think, of tenacity. And my personal observation after all this is that I think there's about a 3-year threshold that is sort of a Maginot Line, like
okay.
I think people leave. I think some people make the mistake of only coming out here for a year, getting frustrated and leaving. I think it really takes a good 3 years for you to find a good survival job, have a network of supportive people, friends to build on that, where you might make some industry contacts that you can utilize. And I
3 years.
I think 3 years is good. And if you're here, if you make it past the 3-year mark, I think you're here kind of for good, and it'll be, it may still not be terribly successful, but at least then I think before then, I think it's too early to pull the plug.
It kind of weeds out I don't want to say these people don't have any tenacity, or maybe they didn't believe so very much in their dream of making it, so to speak, in Hollywood, but it does kind of weed out. I mean, for those of you who make it, past that threshold, a couple, 3 years, that says something about your tenacity. It says something about your focus. It says something about your way, or your ability, rather, to navigate those obstacles.
100%. That's a great point. And I think that there's also, and this is sort of I'm going to go into the get off my lawn part of my personality, but I think that there's so much of a desire now to be famous instead of to pursue something for the right reasons because you love the work or you love the creation. And I think that that's been very harmful to this industry in particular. You have a lot of people coming here for, I think not great reasons, very shallow reasons. And it's hard to sustain, the drive if that's your motivation is just to be worshiped. If that's your motivation, I don't think there's going to be.
Good point. Well, what do you think is the cause of that? Is it just a purely unexplainable generational thing? Is it just these young kids, this is what their motivations are? Or is it in a broader sense, is it social media that's making...
I would lean towards that. I also think that we've, as a society, we start to exalt people who are famous for being famous. And you had this, I guess way back in my early days, we had people like Zsa Zsa Gabor, people who were kind of in the news a lot, but you're not really sure what they did.
Yeah.
But now there's such an abundance of them. And the attention can be so immediate and so voluminous that, somebody can have a viral video and suddenly 30 million people are aware of it within 24 hours. And that was never the case before. So I think that has catapulted this sort of desire to take advantage of it.
I wonder how many actors, actresses, and let's throw musicians in that mix as well. I wonder how many of them are struggling with themselves because they've lost their identity. They've put on a certain false mask. In other words, they're doing what they feel they need to do in order to, air quotes, make it. And in that process, they're compromising maybe their values, their morals. They're stripping away their own identity. I wonder how many people that's happening to.
I had not considered. I think it's probably a huge number. I also think that we've become, as a society, we believe it's our right to know every detail about an artist's personality and their personal life. And I don't think that was the case before. I think that if you were a musician or an actor, it was not as intrusive. You did your work and you might be photographed going to parties and things, but it was not, there weren't stories and stories about what your politics are or what charities you support, and I think that's all. And so people now are crafting what they think should be the ideal, most tele-friendly personality profile, which may not be genuine, like you say. It may not be who they are, but they feel they need to do it, otherwise they're going to be.
Yeah. I've just always wondered what some of these newer celebrities, what they're hearing from their publicist. And then I look at the old cats, that people that I respect, somebody like Neil Young, who's my favorite living artist.
Yeah.
That guy is still a mystery. He's been doing this for 50, probably 60
plus.
some years.
Yeah.
He started like in 1964, I believe, and he's still a mystery. And I don't believe that's contrived. I think that's just his nature. And he got, successful at what he does in a time where a publicist wasn't telling you to act a certain way in order to be famous and popular.
Yeah. I think
whereas now these publicists, and even the artists themselves, they're locked into that pathway, that modern pathway that says this is what you have to do to be famous. Now go do it. Because if you don't, you're not going to make it.
And I think furthermore, you used to have the privilege of letting your work speak for itself.
Well, yes.
Now there's the level of competition and the volume of competition is so intense that if you're, let's say, stay in the music field, if you're, that medium tier musician, unless you're saying something outrageous or unless you're present at every single, covered media event, you can get lost in the shuffle. And so there's this drive for publicists and managers to get their people out there and visible, and that's the only way they can rise, in amongst this huge sea of people. And I'm not sure that's great for any of these industries.
How have you stayed grounded, Bob? How you're saying these things and you say it because you believe it. So you're almost, I don't want to say you're an anomaly, but there is a narrative out there especially from people on the right, where Hollywood is corrupted, the people are fake, period. There's no room for nuance in the eyes of a lot of people, especially on the right, the political right, when it comes to people in Hollywood. But you, Bob, have it's almost a cultish subgenre following where people just, I love your presence on Twitter.
I'm a jerk, but thank you.
I love it. You're a jerk in all of the right and humorous ways. There's no, how can I say this? You're able to say some things that can at times be rather biting on Twitter, things that you write, but it's not mean-spirited, and it's not from a lofty place. It's not from a place of arrogance. You have always come across as a guy who is very approachable. And that proves to be true. Here I am speaking with you on my podcast, so you are quite approachable. How have you stayed grounded all these years?
I actually do. I do think I veer. I'm trying to check myself. I think very often I do get mean on Twitter, and I try to.
They deserve it. They deserve it.
Yeah, well, they probably do. But my wife will say, that you kind of came across a little bit like an asshole on that one, and I'll look at it again and say, you know what I did, and I get personally invested. You get in these personal fights with people who you're never going to meet, and if you step back and go, this is really silly. Let's argue the issues, or make fun of. Trying to bring some kind of awareness by mocking something, that's one thing, but to start attacking somebody personally, which I've occasionally fall into, and I don't like it about myself, and so that's a constant check I need to do. Coming back to your original point about how I've sort of stayed immune to a lot of the Hollywoods, I think that I'm in a lucky place. I'm a character actor. There's no way around how I'm never going to be a leading man. And I think that those people are treated a little bit differently than those character people like myself
How so?
We're utility players, like I'm always going to be the weird neighbor, the security guard, whatever it is, the guys that supplemental, the supporting cast, which I love, and I would never want to change anything about it. But if there's a red carpet event, the photographers are going to be taking pictures of Brad and Tom, and when I come through, that's not a big sell, I like that because it gives me sort of a certain level of anonymity, even though I think I'm recognizable. A lot of people would never know my name, and I couldn't be happier with that sort of balance. I get recognized enough to stroke my ego, but not sought after so much that I don't have a private life or a real.
So you found a very comfortable space in between anonymity and extreme celebrity. You found which
I love, and I love it, because I'm a dad here in Burbank. I try to be really present sort of in the community in terms of like PTA, and I was a little league coach for a while with my son and stuff like that. So I really had a normal dad life, which I think a lot of people who were in those several tiers above me can't really easily have. When we used to go out with on Cougar Town, we were all really, really good friends, and we would all go out to dinner sometimes. And Courtney Cox obviously is extremely she's in that top tier, and her life is very difficult.
Sure.
She has a daughter who she adores, and just having regular experience in going to the grocery store is not possible for her. And I would see it and go, wow, that's kudos to you for being able to do that. I don't think I could. I think I would just be rattled all the time.
I've always wondered, my thing entertainment wise is stand-up comedy and a musician. I do both of those things. And as successful as I would like to be, I've always thought that where is that line that is crossed to where success makes your life actually worse than it was before the success? People like Courtney Cox, people like Brad Pitt, musicians like Madonna. How I just wonder how much of themselves they lose when they reach that level of celebrity. Like you say, you can't even go to a grocery store. You can't be seen in public with your children and have a normal experience.
Yeah, I haven't been on the receiving end of it, so I don't really know, but I think it really is intrusive, and maybe that's just sort of the deal that you sign on for. If you seek that kind of fame, maybe that's sort of the deal with the devil you have to make. But I do feel for them, and I also, when you see, those old days when Britney had her meltdown and attacked I get it. Who wouldn't crack under that kind of pressure?
Yeah, because that kind of pressure is not normal. That kind of life is not normal. I don't think we as humans are equipped. I mean, we can navigate through that, but I don't think we're equipped to be met with that type of celebrity and that type of accessibility and navigate it without some sort of negative result on us personally.
And what's interesting, it just occurred to me, because this kind of dovetails back to what we were talking about earlier. Now, with the ability for anybody, any single person, to document any event at any time with their camera, there's a heightened awareness that if celebrity A says something mean to the cashier or shows a poor side of themselves in a restaurant, it's immediately documented and it's immediately put on social media. And so there's a microscope now that's on everyone, but particularly people who are name worthy like that, to moderate all of their behavior. And I'm not quite sure if that's the best thing right now. Well,
I think people should be responsible for their actions, but I also believe that people who see these outbursts or these meltdowns, normal people should have a certain amount of understanding that these people are living a life that, like I said, I don't believe humans are meant to live that type of life with that much attention and that level of celebrity.
But the caveat would be, often I think people are baited. I mean, because we know that
sure.
So, and you can bait somebody for half an hour and then film the 1 minute after that where they told you to fuck off.
Right.
And then suddenly we're all going, wow, look at the mouth on her. And it's just, and so everything is taken out of context. I'm not defending. I mean, I think people behave badly, and I think but I'm saying that there's our thirst for immediate, sizzle videos and stuff like that is really, I think, sending us
Well, yeah, a lot of people, like I said, there is this narrative out there that everything about Hollywood is fake and those people are bad and they deserve to be brought down. So there's a lot of people that want to see actors, actresses, musicians, they want to see them burn. Sure. I'm a believer in forgiveness. I can give a couple of examples. In fact, one, I spoke with Eric Ernst, the writer and director for Vice Force Action Squad, which we're going to talk about later. I did an episode with him a few days ago. It was released on Sunday, and we talked about the stand-up comedian Louis C.K. And what he did. And it was a great conversation with Eric, but we slightly disagreed about, how do I put this, about the aftermath of Louis C.K.'s being canceled as part of the Me Too movement. I believe, as I believe everyone thinks, that what Louis C.K. did was terrible. And I don't think there needs to be a discussion about whether he did it or not, because he admitted that he did it. But I guess I was thinking that what Louis did was a horrible thing. He apologized. From what I understand, from what he has said, and actually from what some of these women have said, he has approached them, and they have, I almost said kissed and made up, but the kissing and making, that's the wrong term to use. They've come to terms with what have happened, and they're moving on. But there's a large portion of the public out there who thinks that Louis C.K. should not have the opportunity to return. Yeah. And that part I don't understand. I don't understand the insistence that someone should never be able to make a living because of a mistake that they made. No matter how horrible that mistake is, there should be a path to redemption, a path to forgiveness and reinstatement. I believe that.
Yeah. I think I'm on your side. Did Eric think that there are certain transgressions were not forgivable?
Yes, that's kind of what he can. To paraphrase, he's basically saying that Louis C.K. should not have the opportunity to be on the mic right now, if I am remembering and understanding Eric's point. Yeah. And so we had a slightly different view on what should be happening with Louis C.K. now. But I'm in the general thought that anyone, regardless of what you have done, there should be a path to forgiveness and redemption. Yeah.
I personally, I think so too. Otherwise, how do we encourage ourselves to be better as people and as a society? If you don't learn from your, an interesting side was I was just watching Marjorie Taylor Greene.
Oh God! Wait a minute, I take it back. There should not always be a path to forgiveness and redemption. I take it back.
Let's look. Because did you see this? She had just been to the Holocaust Museum.
Yeah, I saw that.
She talked about how she suddenly now has a new heightened awareness that the Holocaust was bad, and she said, theoretically, she said all the right things. She said, I was wrong. I made a mistake. I asked for your, now because I loathe her so much, I'm still shaking my head, but do we extend it there as well?
Well, okay. Here's the thing. I believe in taking their word for, Louis C.K. apologized for what he did, and he said that he feels bad about it, and he wishes he hadn't done it, and he wants to make it right. So I have to believe him until and my inclination is to believe them until they show that they shouldn't be believed. And Louis C.K. hasn't shown that. Now, and here's one thing I remember about what Eric and I were talking about when it comes to Louis C.K. Eric said, Louis apologized. He went away for a while, and he came back, and he started doing rape jokes immediately. And I'm thinking, yes, he did, but Louis C.K. was not in trouble for making rape jokes. That's not what he was in trouble for. Right. So in Marjorie Taylor Greene's instance, my first inclination is, this woman she doesn't mean it. But, okay, she did say that she's had an epiphany. She did say that she was wrong before. So let's wait and see. Let her have the opportunity to show us that she doesn't mean what she's saying now when she's humbling herself and saying that she's done something wrong. And I can't stand that woman either. I can't stand that woman either. I think she's totally deplorable. You want to talk about a basket of deplorables?
Before she proves that was not quite genuine. I think it will be literally less than a day before there's a new bit of stupid that falls out of her mouth.
And I agree. But again, in the same time as I agree, I do believe that if she chooses to put into words the fact that she has made a change, or she's realized something that she did horrible was in fact horrible, then let's just wait a second and see. And it may only take a second before she proves that she's still the idiot that she's always been.
I totally agree.
Yeah. I cannot get behind anything that woman stands for, but I just can't. But she has apologized and all this stuff. So let's just see what she does. Yeah.
But we do. I think one of the things that I try to, particularly on Twitter when we have these political discussions, try to maintain is an awareness of, if this situation were reversed, would I still feel the same way? Because I really think that what hurts us so much is this the partisan, the what do you call it, tribalism,
Yes.
the I will forgive it when my side does it, but I will condemn it when your side does. That, and I don't think that's helpful for anybody.
No.
And I'm guilty of it occasionally. But I really think that's one of the core principles is if you can go look, if this was reversed, if we switched the teams on here, would you still be taking the same position in either defending it or condemning it? And it's a really good question to be constantly asking yourself.
I think that would get us out of having to experience so many crazy arguments on social media if people would just ask themselves that question right there.
Yeah.
And I'm a believer in the fact that or in the notion that social media and Donald Trump's exploitation of it is the sole reason why we are where we are today. Americans have always disagreed along party lines, but it has never been like this until that idiot started exploiting social media and people's tendencies to step into tribalism. He, as dumb as he is, he was smart enough to exploit that. And I believe that's why we are the way we are today.
Well, he really, because I don't think he's a particularly bright man, but I do think he's a marketing genius.
Yes.
I think that like his entire career was built on branding and on marketing and on creating perceptions that he then used in his political career. And it was all about an image perception and a division and getting a team set and then exploiting it, like you said. And he did it quite brilliantly. Unlike
oh God, don't you hate saying that? Don't you hate using brilliant?
But it's true.
But it is true.
Because we wouldn't be in the situation. We would have dismissed them as another kook.
Yeah.
We had people like, and I didn't dislike him that much, but people like Ross Perot who just were able to be dismissed as kind of nutty, or Ron Paul, who really reached out to certain little factions and segments and spoke truth to them.
Yeah.
But then they were able to be just cast aside because of whatever other and he did not fall into that. Somehow he rose above,
but I think he rose above by being at his very core a very vile, hateful and petty person, and he tapped into an element that people like Ross Perot and others that were kind of on the fringes of what is a normal politician. They didn't tap into that ugliness that Trump did, but I think he was able to tap in that because that's a part of his character. I truly believe that.
Yeah, I'm with you 100%, and I think that there was, for most politicians, you'd say, well, there's a baseline that they're not willing to go below, and that wasn't the case with him.
Exactly.
And
bottomless pit for him.
And you trust most people. I trust people aren't going to tell me a bold-faced lie to my face on camera, and he had no hesitation to do so.
And that's why the whataboutism that a lot of people on the right will throw in your face the minute you bring up Trump or what the Republican Party stands for, they'll throw in this whataboutism. Well, the left does this, that, and the other. While their point may be truthful, it's not comparable to the types of things that Trump did or what the right is doing. Again, there's a certain vile, ugly, willfully destructive element that's in place on the right that you're not seeing on the left.
Yeah, it's going to be it's a very dark time. It's going to be interesting to see how the next 2 or 3 years play out.
It's a very dark time, and I can tell you, as an expat here in Norway, watching all of this happen from a distance, it's almost like a syndrome that we expats have. At least we here in Norway, we communicate with each other quite a bit. You and I have a common friend, Tiffany Troutman.
Yes, sure.
We talk about this all the time. It's this feeling of like we're not doing a duty because we can't get involved the way we want to because of that distance. It's almost like a syndrome that we have as expats. Yeah. What year did you
go out to go to Norway?
Wow, man, I've been here since 2002.
Oh, wow. Okay.
2002. Yeah. So so
did you go just post? That was just post 9/11. Was that in any way a catalyst in you going, or is that unrelated?
No, 9/11 is unrelated. Actually, I'll give you the short story. The reason we moved here. I think I told you before I was a police officer in the Chicago area, and I had gotten involved. I was a detective, and I had gotten involved in a pretty serious case. It was an organization that worked multi-statewide and actually out of the country with drug sales, weapons, money laundering, counterfeit money, things like that. And in the process of working that case, they found out where we lived. Now, I was already married to my Norwegian wife at that time when we were living in the Chicago suburbs, and they found out where we lived, Bob. And short story, push came to shove, and the best thing to do was to
get out.
To get out. So I quit that job, and
did you receive threats? Did you find out?
They came to our house.
Was it?
They came to our house. It was 11:30 at night, and we got a telephone call from a neighbor, the lady next door, who says, "Hey, I'm looking out the window, and 3 guys just jumped over the fence in your backyard, and they're coming to your door." Skip ahead to the next day, and 15, 20 guys showed up at my wife's job where she was working. And that was pretty much it.
Wow.
I put her in the car that evening and drove her up to some friends in Minnesota. And she just stayed there for a month or two. And then she ended up coming back to Norway. And I followed her about a month or two after that. So
that's terrifying.
It is. It's a crazy occurrence in my life, somewhat traumatic, and it was not a good reason to move. I mean, it was a good reason to move, but it wasn't the reason why we wanted to move. But it happened, and here we are. I can't go back to the shoulda, woulda, coulda type of thing.
Sure.
Things are well. We're incredibly blessed to be living here. Just talking about the political situation back in the States and the corona situation back in the States over the last year, for us to be here in Norway has been an enormous benefit and blessing to us. I just have to say that. So I can't complain. Can't do it. Can't complain.
Everything happens for a reason.
It sure does. It sure does. Let me ask you another question about your career before we get into Vice Force Action Squad.
Okay.
We are going to talk about Vice Force Action Squad, but one more question, just to fill me in on something I've been curious about. I like your characters that I've seen. They're so funny. They're so comical in a dark and twisted kind of way, especially your character on Scrubs. Yeah. How much of that, because I know in some acting situations, you're allowed to put your own personality into it. You're allowed to change the lines a little bit, and more of who you are comes into that character. Are you a comedic person? Are you funny? Do you have any wit that is close to the type of wit and humor that we see in your characters?
Yeah, absolutely. And I think that happens all the time. In fact, I've only occasionally met some actors who you really do think are very, very blank slate that way. And I'm certainly not. And I think the Zeltzer character was closest to who I really am. My teenage boys are still asleep. If they were to wake up, they would tell you story after story about really inappropriate things that Dad has said to get a laugh.
I love it.
And my wife, of course, one of her running jokes is that getting a laugh supersedes almost any other lesson. Like, Bob will say it because it got a laugh, because it may have been wildly inappropriate or not a good teaching moment or whatever, but it got a laugh. And so, yes, I think the Zeltzer character was closest probably to who I am, because I really love that when somebody says something and you think, and you almost do that double take, like, did he really just say that? It's either got a double entendre, or it's just said in a way that you think that's not. and I really, really love that, and that's just why I think I gravitated to Zeltzer so much.
Well, that character is brilliantly written. The writing on that series, maybe up until the last season was some of the best writing. And again, this is probably my favorite series of all time. Is Scrubs. I've laughed and cried, and that's an element in Scrubs that I loved. It was funny, but sometimes it really ripped at the heartstrings.
Absolutely, really, really beautiful stuff, and be also because I think you started to over the years care about those people so
Oh
much because
gosh, yes,
they were so genuine.
yes,
Their friendships, then the antagonism, the workplace antagonism, all that stuff seemed so real and so
yeah,
genuine that I think you really felt like you were part of their lives. But we were talking about how Bill Lawrence's sets work. He will write out, obviously there's the original, the script as written, which they'll do until they're happy with what they have. Then he and the writers will pitch out to the actors alt lines, alternative lines. And for a character like Zeltzer, who very often I only had maybe 4 lines in
yeah,
any given scene,
yeah,
but they're all really amazing.
yes,
And and they're all punchlines. And so
yes,
Bill and the writers would just throw out, now this one, now this one. And so and then he was especially when he starts to trust you, as he kind of did with me. After that, then you get a couple freebies on your own. He says, now you surprise me, and I'll throw out 1 or 2 that have been buzzing around in my head.
right,
And then in the editing room they'll decide what works best and make their choices. But that was the routine way that all scenes would be
okay,
shot, and he really loved all those people, Zach and Donald and everybody. They're all really wickedly good improvisers,
yeah,
and they're really good on their feet. And there are a lot of actors who, when you throw them a new line, they haven't had a chance to process it or think about it,
yeah,
and
yeah,
they can't. And it doesn't mean they're worse actors. It's just everybody's got their own manner of dealing
right,
with stuff, and that's not a technique that a lot of people do in film and TV anyway. So
yeah.
those actors are fine. But with Bill's sets, he needed people who could adapt immediately on the spot. You throw it to me, I throw it back to you, and I don't, and it's seamless.
Well, I think it comes
all
through.
those people are really good.
I think it comes through in this series. People can see that there was something special in that writing process, the writing and directing process. Do you do any writing? Do you do any writing, Bob?
I don't. I was a big improviser in college, and I've done several shows that were fully improvised. So that's sort of my equivalent of writing. But the times that I've tried to actually write story, I've not been pleased with it. I don't think I write well for other characters. I don't think I write well for other voices, and
I
I can write very well for stuff that I would play, but not for. And I don't think big picture story. So
No.
I don't think that's a strength I have.
What do you aspire to in Hollywood? I mean, you've already said you're quite satisfied with the way things have gone. You appear to be quite a happy guy, but I'm sure you still have aspirations. What would you like to see coming over the horizon for you?
To be honest, I love the level of work that I'm doing. The only thing that I don't particularly care for is the uncertainty of it. In terms of how, and I'm in my 50s now. And so going for, forgetting COVID, but when we're back to normal, going for long periods of time where you're not working, when I've got a tuition payment or, mortgage and stuff, it's much less appealing in your 50s than it was in your 30s.
I can imagine that uncertainty of projects and when will they come and will this, that, or the other get canceled?
Sign on for here because it's come. That's the way it is, and you try and be. My wife and I are fairly frugal with how we live, so we always have a little nest egg that will carry us through the rougher times. But I think what I would love is to be, like with Cougar Town, that was a steady gig for 4 or 5 years, and so you have a certain security that you feel like you're gainfully employed. Your job isn't ending in 2 weeks, which is what most of mine are. Is I'll get on a show and it'll be a week or 10 days worth of work, which is great, and it pays well. But then after that, I don't know what I'm doing, and that gets a little old. But it's not a surprise. I knew that was the way it was going to be.
Can you talk about that process? Okay, you do a project, you go in, it lasts however long it lasts, and now there's nothing. Do you take a deep breath and lean back and maybe spend a little more time with the family before you start looking for the next gig, or do you pick up that phone to your?
You're looking for the gig sometimes when you're shooting the previous thing.
I see.
I mean, especially now, everything now is being done on with self-tape,
Yeah.
where people are not auditioning in the room in person with anymore. Um, so we have like a little studio set up here, and my wife will shoot and read with me for and before I submit auditions. And so it's really a constant sort of keeping all the juggling balls in the air in terms of where hopefully what's the next job after this and the next one after, or one that's
Yeah.
get a film that shoots in 2 months from now, and
Yeah.
and part of that can be kind of exciting because everything is new. It's always, when I audition, if I'm working on a sitcom but I'm auditioning for some drama, there's a constant amount of variety, and that's exciting and feels rewarding.
Sure. Sure.
The worst feeling is what it was during COVID, where there's literally nothing. I mean, nothing's auditioning, nothing is. So not only you're not working, you're not even creatively flexing at all.
How did that affect you? How hard was that? I mean, you're saying it's hard, but how hard was it? Can you put some sauce on that?
Okay, it was hard. It's sort of demoralizing because you don't know what's going to be the future. For me, I was able to weather it, I think, primarily because I've got this amazing family, and I was able to focus my sights on, my son just had his first year in college, and so that became a focus, and living life through what he's experiencing. And I've got an amazing wife, and we were able to take on some household projects and do some things that kept us busy. But I know there were a lot of my friends who really didn't fare so well, if they were single or didn't have strong networks. To have that work aspect taken away, not just financially but also creatively, really did a number on them. And people either kind of started to lose their minds a little bit, or said screw it, and they left town, and they said they'll go back to family, at least get out of here where I feel like I'm being smothered. So it was rough, I think, on a lot of the creative industry people.
Yeah, and again, it's not just a bed of roses in Hollywood. Again, I want to speak against that narrative that you guys are this elite gang that are, living on milk and honey constantly. I mean, it's a grind. It's a grind for you guys.
And this having on Twitter all the time. When I upset somebody and they're like, "Well, you live with security guards in a gated community," I'm like, what? Have you taken a look at what I live in? I have a 1,400 square foot house, and I'm mowing the lawn.
Look, I try to be sympathetic to how people have. I try to be sympathetic, period. But especially this past year and a half with COVID, I try to be sympathetic, regardless of a person's status on that ladder of employment and status and whatnot, because COVID and the isolation has affected people in a lot of different ways. Some people have sailed through it and I shouldn't speak too soon. Like I said, I'm getting tested tomorrow.
I know, right? I know. Yeah.
And I have asthma, so if I get corona, I think I'm going to have a rough time of it. But whatever, cross my fingers. We'll see. I'm getting tested tomorrow.
Yeah.
But for the most part, I've sailed through this. In fact, I've and it almost makes me feel guilty to say I've almost thrived. My podcast has really shot up over the last year. I've had access to some people who I probably wouldn't have had access to, but because of COVID, they're sitting at home with not too much to do. But then I see the other side of things, especially among my friends who are artists, musicians, stand-up comics, actors, like yourself. This has not been a bed of roses for them.
It's not. And
when you can't express that creative side, there's something that's worse than not being able to have things in line financially. There's something about that creativity that gets stifled that
when that's
really
taken
hurts.
away and you feel that there's nothing. When you're suddenly in a vacuum, I think that's a very different feeling. Now, there were some great things that came out of it. I think people learned a great deal through like their Zoom interactions with friends. Okay, here's a good example. So we have this little group of 8 of us that, and 4 of us were all friends in college, and so their partners makes 8, and we started this sort of bi-monthly Zoom dinner party, and every second Saturday we'd have we'd get together and we'd have some sort of theme night or a game night or something. But it was one of the most enjoyable experience, and we would look forward to it for 10 days to this next party where we're going to see everybody and feel like you're social.
That's beautiful.
And it was fabulous. And there are other great things that came out of COVID where people learned stuff about themselves or they picked up new hobbies. There were a bunch of very creative people that, I was just watching Blair Erskine last night on, who's the MSNBC guy who was kicked off. I love his show too. He comes on after Rachel.
Yes.
He used to be NBC. What's his name? He used to be NBC, and then he did something bad, and now he's on
Total brain fart. I should know who this guy is.
Anyway,
yeah.
So, but Blair Erskine she's the one, the very fiery redheaded woman who does all the characters, and he said he cut to her for her take on the ERCOT, the Texas power grid that had gone down. She had done a very funny bit on that. Or Sarah Cooper was another one that came out of COVID. All these really creative people that suddenly found a voice and a venue through COVID was kind of exciting too. So there are some silver linings, I think.
For some creative people, COVID was a stimulus to that creativity.
Mm-hmm.
They wanted to stay creative. How are they going to do it now? And people came up with some really amazing ways of doing that. And hats off to them. But also my heart goes out to those people who suffered and still are suffering. Some people have been broken by these times. And that's why I can't help but get a little pissed off. I have a lot of tolerance for people, but I get pissed off when I hear people try to minimalize the effects of COVID, or they try to just delegitimize the experts who tell us how dangerous this can be.
Yeah.
And it's about to get personal for me, depending on what this test that I'm going to take.
We don't
tomorrow.
want to dip back into the political waters.
No.
But the ability to make a disease partisan is so.
Isn't it sad?
It's something vile that you could literally just tell who someone voted for by the way they behaved in a pandemic. I mean, that's ridiculous.
It is absolutely ridiculous. I want the good old days where I could have friends and family who were on the opposite side of the political spectrum, who were Republicans, and we would have friendly disagreements, and we would come out of it knowing a little something better about that person. Whereas today, it's just it's immediately a write-off. It's hatefulness, and that goes above and beyond politics. That's a social dilemma we have.
Well, I don't know about you, but I come from a relatively conservative family. I've got a ton of military in my family. Yeah. I was always very moderate, and I voted for George W. Because I was really sort of disappointed in how Bill Clinton handled the Lewinsky stuff and his perjury and stuff. That really upset me.
Sure.
Because I expected more from a president.
Sure.
So I voted for George W. And I voted for Schwarzenegger. There are plenty of Republicans I voted for, but the current Republican Party is a party that bears no resemblance to
this is not the Republican Party. This is something totally different.
Yeah.
Oh God! Enough of politics.
Okay.
Vice Force Action Squad.
Okay, yeah. I think that's. I'm so this a little thing, and I'm dying to watch what you talked to Eric about, because I think the world of him. And
I love that guy.
This thing has languished for a couple of years. He held it back for quite a while before, because we filmed this.
Yeah.
I think probably 3 years ago.
Yeah.
But it's so scrappy, and it's small, and it's the kind of project that I love being associated with, because it's like the little engine that could.
Yes.
And I think, and you and I sort of briefly, when we did the pre-interview, talked about the tone of it, how that really speaks to me for a number of reasons. But I don't think it's had a huge, certainly it hasn't built up its little cult following yet. But I think it's the kind of thing that could, because it's different, and it's like I said, I think scrappy is a really good word for it. It's made by people who, there are no names in it. But it's shot beautifully. I think it's written exquisitely, and I think the acting's great. So I really hope people get a chance to see it, and I'm delighted that you picked up on it, because that's, I think, how we would end up getting some kind of generated interest in it, is through people like you.
Well, thank you for saying that. And I tell you, I'm doing my part to give this project as much exposure as I can help with, because I think it needs to be seen. Like I was telling you on the phone the other day, it is a different kind of comedy. And I can't even put words in it. I fumble when I try to explain how it's different, because it's so strangely different. As a former police officer myself, I hear you guys who are acting in this film joking about things that we used to joke about, very similar to the things that we used to joke about with real cases.
Yeah.
And it just really hit home. Of course, you guys take it to the extreme with the stupidity and the outrageousness, but that element of realism about what cops really do joke about is in there.
Well, I also think that, and I've always been a huge fan of playing the best comedy is comedy that's played really straight.
Oh God, yes.
The more seriously that you take it as an actor, the better it reads as comedy to the audience.
Yeah.
I think everybody does. I think Daniel and Taylor both do a great job of fully committing to those boneheaded characters who believe everything that they say.
And they are boneheaded 100%. Characters.
Yeah, right. And that's great.
And the acting is done, like you say, it's done in such a way to where for me personally, when I'm watching a comedy, I'm very much aware of the actors reading lines and their made up lines. But maybe it's because I'm a former cop, and like I say, you guys are touching on things that we actually joked about. But the acting is done in such a way, and the storyline is done in such a way that I got sucked in, and I didn't look at you guys as actors. I looked at you. You guys were living those parts, and everything is done not in this hacky ha-ha way, but with this very serious, almost very Shakespearean delivery.
Yeah,
and
I think so too. And
beautifully,
really
just
works. And I think
beautifully written and beautifully performed.
Well, we talked a little bit about earlier in the pre-thing about how this also, to me, harkens back to some of those late 70s, early 80s cop shows that really took themselves extremely seriously. And their heroes were really heroic, unlike these guys. But I think the tone was very similar. And then Eric added some of these great elements. I think the music and the way some of these scenes are shot really is sort of a little bit of a homage to those cheap, like Beretta or Cannon or any of those shows in the 70s, 80s that were really super cops. Starsky and Hutch, of course. Well,
Eric is such a brilliant creative mind. It's like I said to him when I had him on the podcast. I said the storyline and the writing is so crazy that the guy who wrote it, the guy who came up with this, has to be talented. I mean, you can't be a hack and come up with something like this. You've got to really know what you're doing. You've got to really have an analytical mind, but also have the looseness and creativity to put it in this new kind of comedic format. And I truly call this a different kind of comedy. If I could sum it up, if I were to make a promo poster for you guys, it would say a different kind of comedy, because it is. There's nothing like it out there.
I agree. That's great. I'm really delighted that you that it's reached somebody like you, because I think you're kind of our target audience, and I would love it if this thing would have some kind of future life after this.
Well, the thing is, the magic of YouTube, because for those who are watching and listening, this is a what's called a web series, and it's in a series of 10 installments. I don't know what the average length, but I want to say maybe 5 minutes.
4 to 5 minutes, I'm guessing. They're pretty quick.
Yeah, pretty quick, so that it will keep your attention. In fact, when I watched it, I watched the first 4 episodes the very same day I found out about you guys. I sat down, watched the first 4 episodes, and I had to stop because I had to live my life. So I got back into it the next day, but I went back to the first one because I knew I need to watch all of this in one sitting. And I did. I did exactly that. Sat down and watched all 10 episodes, and was left wanting more. I mean, it was written in such a way that you cannot help but want more. So I'm thinking that element, when we talk about this living a life, that element there, that thing that pulls the viewer in and makes us want more, that plus the magic of YouTube if it just catches on through that algorithm. And how does that happen? That happens by word of mouth. How did I find out about it? Word of mouth. What am I doing to help spread it? Word of mouth. I hope there's people listening that are going to hear about this. And when I posted Eric's episode, I linked to it. When I post your episode, I'm going to link to it. When I speak to Taylor and Daniel, I'm going to link to it. So it has to be a word of mouth thing. But I can see this getting popular. I can see this getting that cult following.
One of the benefits of YouTube is that it's not a case of watch it this Tuesday at 9:30.
Right.
It will live there until the right, like you say, the right, and the right little fire starts.
Yeah.
And I always I'm not a very good self promoter. Like I'll put stuff up, but I don't hammer it because I feel like it feels distasteful to be always promoting something that I'm in. But I really do. This is the kind of thing where I could get behind because I think it does deserve an audience.
Well, and this is also a relatively small. It's a very small production. It's independently made, and that makes it so much more attractive to me. I'm in
self-financed,
exactly. I'm into these kind of things. The go-getters. Eric is a go-getter.
He is.
Eric started all of this without the. You talk about Hollywood and Hollywood influence. He's doing this without all of that. He's standing on his own 2 feet. And there's something that's incredibly attractive about that. I think if that element, I'm not a publicist or a producer or anything, but I would think that if that element could get out there to the people, that this is independently funded by one guy's dream.
Yep. Now, did he talk at all about why he held it back for and mulled over releasing it for a couple of years?
We didn't. And in fact, I've already told Eric I need to have him back because we started off talking about Vice Force Action Squad right away, and we had maybe 15 minutes of that. And then we got into talking about the ins and outs of Hollywood for well over an hour. And I literally had to, and I usually don't do this. I'll let my guests take it wherever it goes, but I had to stop him and say, hey, man, we need to get back to Vice Force.
Right.
So we ended up with maybe 45 minutes about it. So I think that kind of got lost in the whole thing. But I think that's important. Yeah, but I think that's an important part of the story. Again, if that average guy element gets out there to the people, it's going to make it very attractive. So what do you want to say about that path to getting this released and why it got helpful?
That actually was not. I wasn't part of the any part of the decision making for. I was just a hired gun for this because Eric may have told you during his discussion that he was a writer on Cougar Town.
Yes,
and that's how I knew him. And I really liked him from when we were on set, and just we hit it off. And so when he came to me and said, would you be? Yeah, and this is a role for me that's way out of my normal comfort zone. Like I never play a police chief. I mean, I'm always the criminal. I'm going to be the guy that's walked into the booking room.
The deviant. But you could say you're the voice of reason. You're the voice of reason in this series.
So for a number of reasons, this was totally sort of outside of my comfort zone, which has made me even more excited to do it. Because I'm looking for more and more things that are kind of like a little departure from what
I love it.
I've been cast at a lot.
I love that.
This is exactly the kind of project where you're going to be able to do it because it's small and it's self-financed and it's going to give actors a chance to
you can stretch your legs a little bit, try something new. Yeah.
Exactly. So it was super appealing for a number of reasons, and I did that. And then I'd run into Eric, or we'd chat, and I'd say, what's happening with that? He says, I'm not. It's not quite ready yet. But so I was never part of any of the producer kind of roles where deciding why something happened or not. I was just delighted when it finally came out because I got to see it and I knew it was going to be funny, and I was really thrilled. I knew it was funny when we were doing it. I think it surpassed my expectations when I finally saw it. In terms of the quality of the filmmaking.
So it surpassed your expectations.
Yeah.
Now, I think you kind of hinted to not being the type of actor who can. I think what you said was you can't. You find it difficult at times to promote things that you've been on. But how do you feel about when you see you do watch yourself? You do watch your own performances, right? Afterwards,
I do. I mean,
and is that a weird?
Reluctantly, I don't particularly like it. I'm always thinking about something I wish I'd done instead of the thing I did. So I'm sometimes a little negative. And my wife gets irritated with me because I often don't tell her in advance when I'm in stuff. I have to pre-screen it because I want to make sure that it passes my test before I let her or family know about it.
I can identify with that. My wife doesn't even know the name of my podcast, and she's a frequent guest on my podcast. I embarrass her constantly because at the end I'll say, "Now tell everybody how to find me," and she'll stumble because she doesn't even know the name of the podcast.
Yeah, so we're cut from the same cloth then. I'm not a great self promoter, but it certainly makes it easier when it's something you really think is good and worthy of attention, and that's what I would say about this.
So you had to kind of stretch out a little bit. You were in slightly unfamiliar territory with your role as police chief in Vice Force Action Squad. So when you watch it, you say you enjoy it. You say it is funny. What do you see in that performance that has given you growth? Because to me, a new challenge means growth, whether you succeed or fail. Yeah. The endeavors that you meet, the endeavors in which you engage during that new challenge, it means growth, period. Yeah. How have you grown from this?
That's a great question. I think when I watched it, I was pleased with the fact that I could have, we would call it sort of weight as an actor, like that there was seriousness and gravitas to who I was, which usually I don't bring to a role.
Right.
I'm usually much quirkier and flightier and more neurotic or whatever. Yeah. And so I think what I wanted to do with the police chief is have the stereotypical guy with weight and intensity. And I thought that I hit that in a way that made me happy, which was encouraging because that was something I wanted to see more of in my work.
Yeah. Well, it definitely was a different role for you. When I found out you were in it, I probably should apologize, but I was expecting you to be almost a Dr. Zeltzer type of guy, but then here you are, and it was quite obvious this was different ground that you were treading on. And I'm always attracted to that struggle, growth type of thing. Yeah. So I saw that. I identified that immediately once I saw that this was a different kind of character for you. So it's interesting to hear you speak on that.
And I think it was just a really positive experience. There's not always the case when and I think sometimes with these smaller projects where everybody is either volunteering their time or close to it but doing it because they really love it. There's something you see in those projects, I think, that comes through on the screen that's kind of wonderful. Tell
me a little bit about Taylor and Daniel. Have you ever worked with them before? For those who are watching or listening, Taylor and Daniel are the two main characters, the two detectives in this series. You've never worked with them before?
No, never worked with either of them, and I would absolutely do it again in a heartbeat. I thought they were both superb.
Those guys were really good.
Easy. They were really good. They were really, again, we talked about like that ability to be fairly flexible and loose on set, like with the Scrubs group. They have that in spades, and so like there was stuff that we would be doing that would kind of veer off script, or we come up with new bits of business, and they were both really just perfect at adapting and flying with stuff, which and I love to work that way. And I think you can often get some really exciting new things that maybe weren't on the page when you started, just by being really kind of open to it during shooting.
Well, it's a wonderful piece of art, and it was just really cool to see that you were a part of it. It was really interesting to hear the story of it from Eric's point of view, and now from your point of view. And not too long, I'll be speaking with Daniel and Taylor about it, and then that'll kind of bring things to a close temporarily, because again, I'm not done trying to get the word out about this series. So we'll see what we can put together after I've spoken with Daniel and Taylor.
Well, we appreciate it immensely, and thank you so much for taking an interest in the show.
Two things I want to ask you, Bob, as we close out.
Yeah.
There's a thing that I've started asking my guests, two questions that I've started asking my guests, and I don't know if I'm going to make this a habit, but it's been fun so far. So I'm going to say 3 words, and then I want you to fill in the rest using as many words or sentences as you need. Bob Clendenin is. Go ahead.
Bob Clendenin is.
I'm terrible. I'm just terrible.
There's so much to this. I don't want to start off on the wrong foot. Bob Clendenin is a genuinely nice guy who has several issues.
Wow. That's very deep, Bob. That's very deep.
Will that do for now?
Hey man, if that's what you give, that's what we'll take. That will do for now. That's very deep though.
I need to. Well, that was my wife.
Hello, wife. Come say hi.
She just did a drive-by.
Tell her to come say hi.
He says, come say hi. I have to take you off microphone now. This is John in Norway.
Hi.
John in Norway.
This is my wife, Erin.
Hi, Erin. How are you?
I'm fine, thanks. How are you?
You know, I'm doing great. You have such a wonderful husband here. I've kind of known him from a distance through Twitter. We have a very good friend in common on Twitter, and to sit here and speak with him now is quite the blessing. He's the guy I thought he was.
See?
Yeah.
See?
She's still not sold. She doesn't know.
Well, it's not that I'm not sold. I love him. I'm still with him. 20 years.
We just had our 20th anniversary.
Oh, congratulations. Congratulations. A couple months ago, I had my 20th anniversary with my wife. So, yeah.
Wow.
That's pretty great. Congratulations
Thank you.
to you as well.
She's a crazy, tiny little spitfire of a Norwegian woman, but I love her.
Nice.
Then
I
have
have
someone come.
to get ready for a meeting.
Okay, fantastic.
Nice to meet you,
Nice.
John.
See, and that's what my podcast is, and you never know. I've had episodes where my kids have come in and asked me what's for dinner and all kinds of stuff like that. So to have your wife on for a second is no big.
The whole COVID thing, there was a compilation video of it was a compilation video on-air anchors or pundits being interrupted by their family, by their children or their wives during the course of their putting their, and it was like a little 10-minute compilation of, and it was hilarious because it was just the world we lived in for at least the past year, right?
Yeah. Okay, so you answered Bob. Bob Clendenin is, and thank you for that. It's very deep.
Nice guy.
I'm going to submit that to my. I'm going to submit that to my wife. She's in the medical field. She is a psychiatric nurse, so I'm going to submit that to my wife.
Getting a call from her.
And then the second.
Does she do free consultations? Can I do as the first one free?
She's so mean. She's going to squeeze you for every penny you have. She's going to tell you. She's the kind of person she'll tell you what you need to hear to where you really think you're fucked up, and then she's going to take all your money.
But you know what? I've not actually been in very much therapy, but the one I have, the few times I have, I've wanted so desperately to have that kind of therapist say, you know what, you're a fucking mess. You need to do this, this, and this. But instead, a lot of times you get, well, that's okay. Let's talk about that. And it's like, no, I want to know what I did wrong.
I think I lean that way as well. My therapy is this podcast. I started this podcast. I lost my son to a heroin overdose.
Oh, my God, I'm so sorry.
Thank you. Yeah, November of 2019, I lost him to a heroin overdose, and I was extremely depressed and just didn't know which way to turn.
How old was he?
24.
Oh,
24.
Jesus, that's heartbreaking.
And that was his 8th or 9th overdose. So he really had angels looking out for him. He had angels looking out for him to be able to recover that many times from I'm talking overdose down for the count.
When did he start using? Do you know?
From what he said, he was 17. So that's a lot of years of a lot of suffering. Yeah. But this podcast, talking with people who, and again, I tease my wife relentlessly, but she's the smartest person and the best friend I have. She told me I need to find some way of getting inspiration to get out of that depression and all of that inactivity. And she had been pushing me for years to either get into radio or do a podcast. And she said, why don't you start that podcast and invite people on and just start talking again?
Yeah.
And you might learn a few things. And by God, I have. I've learned a
I
lot
can
from
only
you.
imagine.
It's inspiring. It's motivating. And how can I be? I mean, I guess I'm always depressed, and I'm still trying to deal with this thing. But how
Sure.
can I be inactive when I'm on a microphone and video camera talking with people who are so doggone interesting and who have so many motivating aspects to their life? So that's my therapy. This podcast is my therapy.
My heart goes out to you. I can't even fathom the
Thank
pain.
you.
I mean, being a father as well, it's unimaginable.
It really knocked
that
me out. It
level
really
of,
did. And I don't know if
yeah,
I'm dealing with it properly. I don't know how long it's going to take, but one day at a time, one step at a time, and I just have to keep looking for motivation. So.
Well, this has been immensely enjoyable talking to you.
Last thing.
Time flew.
Last thing. One sentence. Can you give me?
Is it going to be another one of those tests? Because I think I failed the last one. I can't do another test.
Let's see if you can redeem yourself. One sentence. Can you give me one sentence that you think will lift my listeners and viewers up? Again, this podcast is based on I wasn't telling you all this just to have a pity party, but I wanted to kind of lead into this question. Can you give one sentence to my viewers and listeners that will lift them up? Because this podcast is about motivation, inspiration, and uplifting stories. Can you tell them one sentence, please?
I will say that one of the lessons that I've learned over this last year, I think, is that we saw the absolute worst in people, but we also saw the absolute best in people. And I think we saw some stuff in humanity that should be incredibly inspiring to all of us. And if we can focus on that and not the stuff that we were not as proud of, we can realize that how inherently good we are and how much we can achieve now that we're finally released back into the wild and we can interact hopefully more normally and more socially. I think for me, I learned I crave so much because I'm a relatively solitary person, and I don't need a lot of interaction. When it was taken away, I realized how much I do actually indeed need it, and I'm so eager to be surrounded by people who I can show how much they mean to me.
Isn't that what it's all about?
Yeah.
When you give that much, you can't help but get that much back.
Yep.
Beautiful words, beautiful and wise words from a beautiful and wise human being, Bob Clendenin. I love your work, man. I have so much respect for what you. Thank you for this motivating, amusing, and interesting conversation, Bob. Good luck in all you do going forward. Maybe
John,
this isn't the last time we speak. Who knows? We'll see.
I would love that. You were an absolute joy to speak to, and I would love to do it again sometime.
Awesome. Bob Clendenin, everybody. All right, man.